Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you, Marty. Today we're going back to Shakespeare as we begin to celebrate Passover. And Wendy and I want to wish you all the very happiest Chag Sameach and good Seders coming up.
And same to
I'm
you
going to
as
be
well.
quoting today.
Same to
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much. I'm going to be quoting today from Macbeth. There are two quotes that I want to do. And the first one is when the old man, right after Duncan is killed, starts to talk. And without even mentioning the word, he talks about a total eclipse of the sun. And he says, "By the clock 'tis day, and yet dark night strangles the traveling lamp. Is it the night's predominance or the day's shame that darkness does the faiths of earth and tomb when living light should kiss it?" And the other one, to me, is a very powerful passage from Macbeth about the complexities of space and time and the importance of space and time and the continuum. So I think it's one of the greatest lines in all of Shakespeare. And it's almost as Shakespeare is sitting down writing these lines, and he gets to the start of this, "She would have died hereafter," when suddenly there's a tap on his shoulder, and he looks to his left, and it's the Lord, and he says, "Take a break. I'm taking over for this paragraph." And it happens just after he is told that his wife has passed away.
Oh,
And Macbeth himself says, "She should," and I'm going to add one extra line to this quotation at the end. "She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in its petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and then is heard no more. Out, out, brief candle, lies but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, but signifying everything." Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Very nice.
I have to uh, I have to say I had to memorize that speech.
We saw you mouthing the word.
In a high school play.
right.
I had to do that, and it brought back a lot of memories. Thank you. It was fascinating. Shakespeare is an interesting person because, in addition to, it's almost as if he is a philosopher, a commentator about the life of his time, and also the scriptures. And a very interesting fellow, very interesting fellow. Yes, Rabbi Norman, and welcome.
Oh, thanks. Good morning, everybody.
Good
job.
morning.
Good
morning.
I don't know if any of you were able to watch because they started broadcasting it again, the Shtisel, the first episode of the third
yes,
season of Shtisel.
I love it.
And in Hebrew, they were. I noticed, and I was talking to Lynn about it. They made a difference. Or the rabbi who's talking made a difference or distinction between a contemporary Hebrew poet with one word, who he described as a bard, and the traditional classical poetry, as it were, songs and lyrical poets that we use in our prayer book. For example, he used a totally different word between. He refused to accept that contemporary, wordsmiths would be considered poets. They were bards, almost with a negative aspect to it.
Interesting.
Very interesting. So thank you, David, for opening an interesting discussion. Well, Rabbi, how is Lynn doing?
Same. Thanks for asking.
Okay, well, wish
One
her
of these
well
days,
from all of
one
us.
of these days, God willing, I'll be able to say she's doing much better.
Yeah, I hope so.
She's on some different medications, so maybe that'll make a difference.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and I know Richard is with us this week, and there's a phone number. I don't know. Is that I'm just not sure of who that is. But anyway, I want to welcome everyone again. And as usual, I lose my place. And sometimes I think it's my subconscious doing that intentionally, drawing us back into the stories. But I think we'll come back to what I was thinking that we overlooked. We'll come back to that. And I think we had a little discussion about the subject, and I don't want to repeat a lot of things. So as we pick up more information about this line of thought, we'll be able to go through it. So we were in the story of Tamar, and what I would like to do is just if we start with verse, it's Genesis 38:24. I think that will give us a little overlap into this to set the stage for some of the events. So if somebody would like to start to read Genesis 38, verse 24.
I can.
Thank you, Ricky.
About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot. In fact, she is with child by harlotry. Bring her out," said Judah, "and let her be burned." As she was being brought out, she sent this message to her father-in-law: "I am with child by the man to whom these belong." And she added, "Examine these. Whose heel and cord and staff are these?" Judah recognized them and said, "She is more in the right than I, inasmuch as I did not give her to my son Shelah, and he is not intimate with her again."
Okay, let's discuss this a little bit. Any comments first from about what you just read?
How could he forget?
Yeah, how did
I don't understand how somebody could forget their visit for such a things, and why there weren't some alarm bells ringing in his ears somehow in the middle of all this.
Well, remember she wore a veil,
And
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
and so he may not have recognized her without the veil.
Yeah.
But the thing is, how can he forget that he lost his sash and staff, or cord and staff? I mean, if somebody visits, I never having known
Well,
anybody.
he
He's
doesn't know,
really,
yeah,
you know,
but he
that's-
doesn't know about those until she does bring them out, and then he says, "Oops."
know that he lost his cord and staff. That's what, that's what, I mean, how much longer? This has got to be a bit of a time later, because now she knows she's pregnant.
It's
So
3
it's
months.
it's not the next day. So he's gone without his cord and sash for 2 months or whatever. And hey, I mean, I can see him dismissing his action at the time, because I'm sure that they thought that the woman was inconsequential, so she was just a thing that he used at the moment. So dismissing the female involved, but dismissing his own clothes, that's what gets me.
Well, it's the symbols of being head of the tribe.
I know, but if you went a couple of months without your symbols of being the head of the tribe,
Yes.
wouldn't you realize you've lost them?
In the back of your mind, I think you would. I think that in addition, since, and I think that would occur initially, but then when nothing has turned up over time, you would sort of dismiss it and get
Yeah,
on with
I
things.
think you do. I think you definitely would dismiss it out of your mind. It's something that you don't want to think about it. You don't want to remember.
And he did make the effort
No.
to find her, to give her the kid he had promised,
Right?
and she couldn't be found.
I don't know. I lose something and it pops up in my mind continually until I find it. I mean, I don't know. I lost keys about 4 months ago. And I still every now and then go, you know, someday those keys are going to pop up. I know they're
Right.
here.
Yeah.
I don't think you would let go of something as important as your sword and staff,
Okay.
which symbol of, you know, your position.
Okay. I thought I saw another hand. Joanne.
He has money, etc. So he would really have
Excuse
made
me,
another seal, etc.
Joanne, could you move closer to your screen?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you.
I
Can't
moved
hear
it
you.
further away today.
Well, that's
Okay,
good.
this is perfect.
Okay, thank you. He has money, and he would have had another staff made, and he would have had another seal made, and he certainly would have had a cord, maybe had quite a few of them to go around his waist. So that those, once he had new ones, he might have thought about it, but not very much.
Okay.
I think, you know, he just would. He was drunk, I believe. He'd been having fun. They were finished with the sharing. And so he's just very drunk looking. And so I don't think he would have recognized more than it was a woman that he found to lay with that night.
Okay. That's a good possibility. What about, it came up in the earlier discussion that that don't you think it's important to someone that the symbols of his position in life, he should be well aware of what he's done with them,
Exactly.
Yeah.
as Ricky pointed out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does this give him certain rights and privileges? Who brings their service to, who is the one that his clan brings their service to? So you would think that
My
over
guess is that
time,
he had a replacement.
Yes.
that's what
If he
you
was
have
that
to.
powerful and in such a position that, oh, I lost that one, I'm not going to tell anybody
Yeah.
where it is. I'll go get the one out of the closet.
Yeah.
I have a feeling
That's
that's
true.
true.
Are these in any way related to birthright? Are these symbols in any way related to birthright?
Oh, definitely, yes.
In what way?
Well, that was a symbol. That's what Abraham gave Isaac. And I assume Isaac, well, that's what the big argument was about between Isaac and no, that was the twin. No, yeah, that was the
Jacob and
twin.
Esau.
Jacob and
Jacob
Esau.
and Esau,
Right,
right.
Esau. I was thinking, no, Esau was by Adam, but it's not. Okay, so yeah, that was what the big issue was. The firstborn, that was the first that was the blessing from Abraham, where he gave total control of his inheritance and his, I guess, the same things that God had given Abraham, he passed it on to Isaac, hoping or thinking that it was Esau at the time.
Okay, okay. And now, in what way is it? So there, you're saying there's a similarity, but is there a difference?
A difference.
Is he the firstborn?
Well, no, Judah was not the firstborn.
Okay, it was Reuben.
It was Reuben, right?
And Reuben does something similar. There's a one-liner that we discussed. Okay, what does Reuben do before we got to this? It was a one-liner, one verse.
Oh, was that the one that he slept with his stepmother?
Yes.
Or mother-in-law, or whatever it was,
Okay.
mother.
And here you have a parallel. It may not be identical, but it's a parallel. A fellow sleeping with his daughter-in-law.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
And we know that in one case,
Will that continue though?
any other comments that anyone wants to make on that? It's usually not discussed this way that I found, but I couldn't find anything in this regard. Maybe Rabbi Norman knows something about that.
Most of the commentary that I'm familiar with focuses on what Tamar does.
Yes,
She,
that's
Uh-huh.
right.
how she approaches the question.
That's right.
Rather than Judah.
And so these are parallel. I often think what people do, and these are going to be addressed in the future when on Jacob's deathbed.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to cite certain things, and I often wonder what this is, but are the actions that people do, or the things that they do? Remember, we're in a chapter that deals with redemption.
Right.
You know, this portion of the book of Genesis deals with redemption. And Reuben, we have not come across anything. He really is washing his hands of the sale of Joseph. He slept with his mother, his mother's servant,
concubine, right?
The concubine of Jacob. And you start wondering, what are the similarities and what are the differences between the brothers? Why are they being singled out? Chris, yes.
Well, I just we were talking about the other thing. I was coming back with the idea that the integrity of the family is still shaky from day one. From the moment that Abraham told, and that's going back to history, you're not my wife, you're my sister. And then that repeats itself with, I'm sorry?
Somebody, hi, Helene.
I'm so sorry. I'm here though.
Okay.
Hi,
welcome.
Welcome.
Okay,
Okay, Chris, please go on, Chris.
Right. So once again, the integrity of the family has always been shaky, and has always they're not completely devoted to a family thing. They seem to constantly be betraying each other or hurting each other, from the beginning. I think that's normal among families. That happens among many of us, but it's still and I don't see them as a perfect group of people, but we're supposed to learn from them. And so far, you keep going back in the same hole. They keep doing the same thing. Seems like they're not really learning what it was supposed to be that first mishap. My idea of the whole group.
Okay.
And I, you know,
That's very good. Yes, Pastor Bruce.
As I'm just reading these 4 verses again that Ricky read, I was really thinking that a couple of things. One is that Tamar did not publicly accuse Judah of this. It was more of a private thing, which was, I think, very, very good on her part. The other thing that I'm thinking about here is that we always have the wider view of things. And I'm wondering if we are to be looking at this as a lesson in not being too quick to judge people.
That's one.
And that even in the midst of all of this, I also thought of later on, well, it was another prostitute,
yes,
Rahab that did something that helped the Israelites. And just wondering if there's, there seems to be some negative connotations with things, but then it also shows us that God uses flawed individuals in redemption.
That's interesting.
This is about, if you said this is about redemption, then
right.
there's flawed people involved in this, and God can use whomever he wants to help in the redemption process.
I like that.
Sounds like a sermon, Bruce.
Of course.
It does.
It is. It's good. It's good because if then you have to raise another question, and I think this has to come out in this story. All of our heroes are flawed in Judaism. Nobody is put up on a pedestal. Some come close, but not quite. They're not worshipped in the same manner as in other stories. And so one of the things that Pastor Bruce just said, I think is very important. How do we know who that someone is that God has chosen to do, to push the story forward in a good way or in God's way? How do we recognize that? Or are we not privileged to know?
I was going to say, we assume that everybody
And everybody, right.
could be that person. So to treat everybody in the manner as if they are the one.
That's my take on it. Very, very well stated. Yes, Michael.
I agree.
I don't know if I'm on the right track here, but I'll try this. God, you don't know if you do something that is not right. You don't know if God is going to directly punish you or you'll be punished in another way. But by thinking like that, you should be, or you have to be on your best behavior all the time.
At least try to, yes.
Do the right
Michael,
thing. In other words,
Rabbi.
can I just modify what you just said? We'd like to be on our best behavior all the time, but if we somehow fall or make a mistake, God wants us to take responsibility and accountability for it.
That's right.
Okay, God knows that we can't always be on our best behavior. We're human. We will make mistakes. But the issue is whether we take responsibility for them. I just wanted to amend what you were saying, which I think is absolutely correct.
It's very good.
And Judah did that. That's the other point.
Right.
That is the
That is
important
right.
point. Now, Tamar, we commented on the fact about Tamar says to Judah, it's I forget, Ricky, didn't you say that it was sort of in privacy?
I said,
No,
Who else said that?
Or
No,
who said it? Who
I
said
did.
that?
Bruce
Okay.
said that.
Now,
Bruce did.
why is that important? I was going to ask the rabbi to comment about when you're criticizing someone, do we do it in public or are we supposed to do it privately?
It's
Private,
privately.
privately.
Absolutely.
Okay,
If at all possible.
yes.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
there's much more in this story than just, oh, he had an affair. There's a lot of other little hidden tidbits that sort of relate to our teachings. And I think I just found it very interesting as I read this in a little more detail. So, yeah, maybe this is one of the reasons why Tamar this story is important about her. Yes, Ricky.
Yeah, I don't see where this is necessarily done in private. It said, bring her out so that, clearly she was somewhere, like in a room or something. As she was being brought out, she sent the message. But I don't see how do we jump to the conclusion that this is being said privately rather than in front of his court, so to speak?
Well, if anybody want to comment on that about the wording?
I think the text, I think, just would have said, Tamar said to Judah,
Yeah.
rather than she sent him a message.
Mm,
she sent a message.
It says here in verse 20, you're referring to verse 25,
Well, read it.
Yeah. But then
where it says, as she was being brought out, she sent this message to her father-in-law. I am with child by the man to whom these belong.
but when
And
it
she
said
added,
that,
examine these. Whose seal, cord, and staff are these?
but when she said, and she added, that sounds more like a face-to-face. In a note, you wouldn't break it up and say, she said this and she added. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, okay, it's possible. But then what I find interesting, Judah, there's no question he is saying this out loud
Yeah.
mhm,
in front of everyone.
right.
So it's something, because he knows he's going to have to change what he first wanted to do to
To
her.
do. Mhm.
And he has to justify his action, and he has to do it publicly. Yes, Don.
Could someone explain Joseph's motivation here? Because it seems to me he is
Joseph, you mean Judah?
Judah.
Judah.
Yeah.
He is he's ethically driven to avoid the Tamar's temptation because he's afraid of what his boss might do. But there doesn't seem to be any, even though God is overlooking this entire scene, it doesn't appear that Judah has his moral compass in operation. It's more of a situational thing, and he doesn't, his boss has been really good to him, and he wants to keep it that way. Just wondering, anyone has any comment on that?
Okay. I think Michael has his hand up. Okay.
We're talking about publicly and privately. If you do it publicly, you are humiliating someone. It's humiliation. And
Right.
that's forbidden, I believe. Embarrassing is one thing. It could be when you embarrass somebody, that could be by accident. It could be accidental.
Right.
But when you do something over and over again on purpose, that's humiliation. And that's not permitted, as far as I know, in the Jewish religion, especially.
That's different. That's different than the question I was asking, Michael. So,
Oh, no, it had nothing to do with your.
Okay.
okay,
No, I was just wanted to
Okay.
get that out because I don't know if I'd have another chance to, that's all.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael. And thank you. David, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think that a difficulty here is that we are trying to interpret this portion of Genesis and the conversations from our modern perspective. I think at the time this took place, the whole thing was, there was a lot less attention spent to what is said privately and what is said publicly. And I don't think the scripture, reading this again, actually specifies whether this was done in all the group or whether they send emails or what. But I think we might be overdoing our modern viewpoint to this.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, David. Yes.
Marty, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Joanne?
Once again, I'm stepping out on a limb, I think, here. But I'm looking at this and what's happening in Arizona today, or with our, with our administration. And they wish if a woman is pregnant and has an abortion, then both she and the person that did the abortion they go to jail. But at no time, my problem is, at no time do they send the man to jail. And it's like, what's wrong with this story? What's wrong? And here I see Judah saying, oh, yes, I did this. I take responsibility for it. And I think we're missing that in our law right now.
Okay, that's another good point.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Okay. One of the things I just want to make a little comment here. Sometimes, as David points out, we should keep things in context of the time period within which it's written.
Mhm.
However, as Joanne is pointing out, it's very hard to do that because we see relationships of an older situation and how it would affect our thinking of today. And this is a dilemma with interpreting scripture by anybody, and because we bring to it our own take on things based on what we have even recently heard about. Yes, Helene.
I hesitate to say this, but I'm going to say it. There's a poet named Rumi. Rumi is an amazing poet.
Yes.
And I read much of the Buddhist stuff. I read, so the Chabda, all of this. And I don't know where it is, whether it's Rumi or whether it's actually from the Buddhist, but it says, what is a good man but a bad man's model or teacher? And what is a bad man but a good man's job? Are we responsible to help someone who does something really terrible and it's out there, it's public? Is it our responsibility to try to help him or her? Or are we prejudiced? I hear a lot of prejudice. I'm certainly prejudiced too about stuff. what is a bad man in Judaism in terms of us? Are we supposed to try to help that bad man get better? Is that what God is doing and saying? I don't know. I'm asking.
It's a good question. I'm going to defer to people who would be able to answer your question better than I can. Rabbi and pastor.
Oh, of course. There's no question that if we can, again, without, and to use some of the phrases that were mentioned before, without embarrassing the individual, but if we can help him or her correct the behavior,
Yeah.
and understand the impact and the consequence of where the mistake was made. And I purposely use the word mistake rather than sin, right? But yes, the obligation is on us. We cannot turn away. If we see something bad happening, if we see someone with bad behavior, bad habits, it's the opposite of don't put a stumbling block before the blind. It's you must help someone who is blind to their own behavior over these stumbling blocks, in a sense.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Pastor Bruce.
The other thing I see here is that so much of what we have in God's word is done in community. I think when you see that, there's certainly things that when you look at even the words in Brit Hadasha that I use quite frequently, it says, go to a person privately first. It does say that. And so you go to the person privately first, and if they're not listening to you, take one or two elders. And then if they're still not listening to you in regards to what the sin or mistakes or bad behavior is, then take it to the whole community. It's a very specific set of things that is set out there. And so in this particular case, I think that as we go about life, there are certain things that we can try to follow in God's word, and community is definitely a part of it at some point. But I think that we try to do everything we can do to help preserve the person's, dignity, and that if they have a right, if they can admit their faults to one or two or three versus the entire community, then you've won the day, shall we say, I guess, in that way. That's the way I would look at it, is that the person is changing based on just a few people, and then the whole community will end up noticing that. Obviously, if everybody in the community is noticing bad behavior, and yet one or two people can surround that person and help that person, then it would go. Anyway, that's just something I was thinking about in that question.
Thank you. Chris, did you have your hand up?
No, I was just scratching myself.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Michael.
David was also raising his hand.
Oh, okay. And David. So
Michael, you're muted.
You don't hear me?
Now you can.
Now we can.
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and it's very, it's extremely important when to help to, and you have to be very, and at least in my opinion, you have to be very careful not to compound a problem. In other words, if somebody is needing help, boy, it's very difficult to keep this cool without a big argument. But if someone is doing the wrong thing, you can't fix it by compounding the problem.
Right.
And I'm afraid to go any farther than that, because it's going to be not good. But that's what I would say. You cannot fix a person by pounding on him over and over again. That's all I would say. But that's, in my opinion, that's very, very critical.
Thank you. Thank you. David.
It's
Oh,
me.
Okay, Wendy.
I have, worked with a lot of people throughout my career, and that includes family as well. And we're not talking deadly crimes here that everybody's trying to incarcerate people because they were that bad. This is take things where people just don't quite do the right thing. And I have learned that unless they are ready to hear you,
Yes.
then they are never going to change. It doesn't matter who, how, and how much. All you will do is just make them get their dander up and they will get worse. So you have to really wait for that moment when they're ready to listen. And if they're not, then the advice doesn't work at all. And I think that goes along pretty much with what Michael and Pastor Bruce was saying. But I have seen that so many times, and it's hard when you know exactly what they need to do, but they're not ready to do it. So that was my point.
It's a very good point.
Good point. Good point. Ricky, your hand is up, and I see Helene is nodding her head. So I'm going to ask Helene too after that.
I had one point, but then Wendy brought up another. My first point was like in Kabbalah, which I hate to keep bringing up, all souls are pure. So if, no matter how bad the person is, there's that spark of pureness in them. And of course, our job would be to try to bring it out. But to Wendy's point, being in a 12-step program, that's the first thing we learn is we can't do something for somebody else. They have to want to do it. You can maybe have an intervention, but if they don't admit that there's a problem, nothing is going to change. So, Wendy brought that up. I mean, that's what the whole, AA and any of the 12-step programs is about is, and in Al-Anon is so hard to teach that the partner, I'll just use that term, can't make the person want to get sober. Although so many people come into Al-Anon trying to learn how to get him sober.
Exactly.
They find out that's not what they're there for. They can't do that. We can't control it. We can't cure it. We didn't cause it. We can't control it. We can't cure it.
Okay, first, Helene, did you have any comments on this?
I think what I do is I ask God for help. And I think if there's a model, Al-Anon is marvelous. If there's a model of goodness in anything, then there's hope. Without hope, this person is doomed. At least hope.
Very good point. Very good point. Sue.
Well, I would just like to say what Wendy brought up was true for all time, not just for our time, not just for modern time. And that is the precise point of these stories in the Bible, that they have to be, each of these strong characters has to be ready to see the big effect, the big picture. If he's not, then the time is not right for the transformation. In order for the transformation to occur, he has to go, or she, through various stages of being ready. And that's a very important point.
Yes,
They got to hit bottom. They got to hit bottom.
That's it.
Sometimes, yeah.
Many
That's
times.
it.
Yes, Don.
I'd like to offer, I spent a number of years as a volunteer on a crisis line. And so I got all the problems, suicidal people, emotional issues, family issues. And I came in thinking, Tikkun Olam, I'm going to save the world here. And after about 3 years, I realized that most people just want to be heard. That
That's
all I
right.
could do was listen. And so many people are neither seen nor heard in their lives. And I was deeply humbled by that experience. So I don't think or at least I didn't have the power to help. I didn't.
Exactly.
Good, very good point. Yes,
I think you
Rabbi.
helped more than you ever could know.
Right. To Don, traditional statement is, if you save one life, you've saved the whole world.
That's right. Mhm.
I'll never know.
Thanks. Well, yeah.
You will know
You will.
someday.
Any other comments? Well, if there aren't any, I'd like to skip to change the subject a little bit. It sort of ties in with this. Again, it's about Judah. In verse 26, at the end of the verse, it says, and he was not intimate with her again.
Right.
Any comments about this?
Lesson learned.
Yes, that's one. Someone has a phone ringing. It's Marcia.
Marsha,
I know, I turned it off. I can turn it off.
Oh, okay. Okay. Any other comments about this? I'm going to raise a question then. Do you think Judah was feeling shame?
Absolutely.
You know, that this has been that it's not just accepting the responsibility, but I think it points to the fact that he was not intimate with her. So one answer is maybe he felt shamed by the situation. He tried to keep it a secret, but wasn't able to. People do some crazy things when they feel shame. Sometimes they try to cover it up.
You're right.
Okay, and sometimes if they speak to, admit it and change their way, it's a better solution. Yes,
Yes, I did have my hand up. Thank
Chris,
you.
and then Rabbi Norman.
Oh, I just think it's just wonderful that he honored her by respecting her, taking care of her after he did what he did. Maybe like you said, and I do believe that it was unknown at the moment that she was Tamar, his daughter-in-law. However, he had promised her to give him this last child, and he failed to do that. So I love this story that he did protect her and honor her by no using or being with her again in any other form other than I care for you.
Okay, the next one I have Rabbi Norman, I have Larry, and then Michael. Okay, Rabbi.
So, open-ended question is my first comment. Is it says that when he recognized the cord and the staff, that he said she's more. But who did he say it to? Did he say that publicly? Did he say it to himself? Whatever. We don't know, because we don't know how anyone else responded. And then there is, while the Hebrew does use the euphemistic term for being intimate, there is another possible. It's working with the vowels a little bit and with the conjunctions, but it is possible to translate the phrase as that instead of he was not intimate with her again, it was that he didn't say anything more, that he didn't identify her. He didn't make the whole matter known. kind of
Oh,
thing.
I
This is
see.
this is just between her and me,
Between
you
you
know,
and me.
and whatever. And that's not the majority of opinion of how to translate it, but it is a possible way of understanding or completing the episode.
Thank you. Thank you. Larry.
Okay, I just looked up 3 different translations, and this is verse 26 we're speaking of. And following up what Rabbi Roman just said, they all use the words, and he knew her no more. Now, how do we get from here to there in our language? To what is
Well,
meaning then and meaning now?
Yeah, the verb is the same verb that we know of from Adam and Eve.
Right.
Right. So that's where we get the euphemism for it. Right. But he knew her no more, meaning he he just ended the matter there. He didn't refer to it again. He didn't identify her. Right.
Okay.
Very good. Very good. Michael.
Sometimes in life, people want to shift the blame somewhere else or to someone else. In general.
At the humankind.
Okay, that's an interesting take on it too. Very good. Very good. Any other comments? Ricky.
Yeah, I just pulled out another, and Rashi's comment. Judah's response testifies to his moral integrity, though his public admission surely subjected him to the jibes of the populace. So he did not hesitate to admit that he was the father, nor did he pretend to pardon Tamar by showing her clemency. And it is better for me to be ashamed in this transient world than to be ashamed before my righteous fathers in the world to come. That's another comment that I've found here.
Okay.
But, we were talking about this as if it was done in private. This Rashi's interpretation is that it was a public admission.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, very good. I have one more, and that is, again, by Rabbi Flawed. He says, although Tamar was now considered Judah's wife, her previous relation to his sons made further intimacy undesirable.
Oh.
Wow.
Any comments about that? Comments about the comment? If there are none, I will just let it go. We don't have to. I don't want to. Oh yes, Joanne.
You just said that he was now married to her, but was there a ceremony or anything like this, or it just she was, and he says, I mean, he was already giving her to all his sons, etc. This lady was not thought very well of to start with, but I'm just wondering, when these 2 children are born, does he in any way feed them, clothe them? I mean, does he take over like as father of them? I'm curious. It doesn't say that here. So
There's no commentary about marriage, and there's no commentary about Judah being responsible for the care of the children.
Well,
it's
as the head of the clan.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
If they were kept within the clan, which we would assume that they were, then ultimately the buck stops here. Right. Ultimately, he's responsible for them.
No, wait a minute.
Yeah, I would go along with that. That it's implied that this is the situation. Any other comments? Oh yes, I'm sorry. Hi, Grace.
Hi, everyone. I'm
Hi,
hoping
Grace.
it's good to see you, and it's great to be here. Thank you. I just been reviewing the comments section. And I'm not sure if we did or did not mention the fact that perhaps she preserved the line of Judah as her actions. And
Did.
that was just a comment. It was not, to be controversy with anything or anyone.
The line to King David continues,
Right.
or goes back to her, right?
Yes. We're going to get into that very shortly. But yes. Any other comment at this point?
Yeah, my trusty chart, my genealogy here.
Right.
Has, those are Judah's only two children. The two
Correct.
that he with Tamar. Tamar has, others, even with with Shelah, with the three sons, or two of the sons. But Judah, if it hadn't been for Tamar and this whole episode, that would have been the end of Judah's line.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's go on, and if somebody would care to start with verse.
Marcia has her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This might just close our thoughts a little bit. She saved Judah's household and historically Israel's, but did not transfer her own position back into a married woman, as it would have been Judah giving her Shelah as promised. So it's like a second thought.
Okay. Very good. Okay, well, let's go to verse 27. If who would like to read?
You want me to continue?
Oh yeah. Oh, wait.
Another volunteer?
Pastor Bruce, were you volunteering or?
I can read.
Okay. I'll let you and Ricky debate.
Well, but Bruce, I read a lot, so Bruce can have it.
Okay.
Read, Pastor Bruce.
When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. While she was in labor, one of them put out his hand, and the midwife tied a crimson thread on that hand to signify this one came out first. But just then he drew back his hand, and out came his brother, and she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." So he was named Peretz, which is, of course, means in Hebrew, breach. Is that enough, or do you want to keep going?
You can finish it with verse 30.
Okay. Afterward, his brother came out, on whose hand was the crimson thread. He was named Zerah.
Right, and that Zerah is brightness, perhaps alluding
Get your
to
chuz going. It's Zerah.
Ah, Zerah.
It's not an H. It's a chet.
It's
Zerah.
Yeah.
Got it.
comments. Any comments about what was just read?
It's kind of an Esau Jacob kind of deal.
Yeah.
Right.
It is.
Very, very important.
Kind of.
Okay, it's different circumstance, but very close
Sure.
to it. And but so what happens here?
I have a comment.
Larry has a comment.
Yes, Larry.
One of the translations I have, instead of crimson, they use the word scarlet. And that brings to mind scarlet letter, that it has a whole different connotation.
Yes, I have that too. That's right, because that would change the entire story at this point if it's interpreted that way.
Okay, we have a question.
What's unique is what Ricky was, to me, the whole thing, of course, is important with the genealogy and the charts, because in the 4th chapter, when you get into the book of Ruth later on, of course, Ruth 4:17, Perez became the ancestor of David and therefore the ancestor of Messiah. Messiah then seems to be from a Canaanite woman and a Moabite woman, two nations that were historically enemies of Israel,
Body part, even if it goes
which
down.
is very interesting. The whole thing is just, moral lessons of the Torah and moral lessons that for national identity, and all these things are kind of all interwoven into this one little. There's a
Good
lot
point.
in here, is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot here.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask Rabbi Norman, and then there are a whole bunch of hands that have come up. So Rabbi Norman, David, Suzanne, and then Grace.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that the English again is a little misleading. The Hebrew specifically says that he called him, meaning Judah gave the names to the two boys. Rather, the English is he was named. Okay, but the Hebrew specific, it's not passive, it's active. That he, which we assume is Judah, that he gave him this particular name. So Judah is involved with these
With
two
the
boys,
children.
right? He hasn't disappeared.
Okay. Thank you. So next one was David.
Yeah, I just
Wendy.
have a question about the birth. And that is if Petta's hand came out first, but then it went back in, and then the second one came out, do they determine just by any quick body part that makes him the firstborn, or when the full body comes out of the womb? How is that determined?
Majority of the body and the breathing apparatus.
Okay, so even though Petta's hand went back in, most of him came out first?
Mm-hmm.
That was what didn't sound very clear.
Well,
that's the way that's the traditional definition.
Okay.
Of when there's actually a birth.
All right, thank you.
While we still have us, I just wanted to add that there's a comment here that Scripture does not hide the sins of its heroes and heroines. In a way, it goes back to Shakespeare writing his play, and then suddenly God says, "Will, take a break, get some coffee. I'm going to write the next paragraph for you." And
there you go.
it almost gives the impression to me that we're sinning is a part of the human condition.
Yeah.
God does not expect us to be perfect. And he does expect us to discuss it and to read it and to try, but not always to succeed.
Very good point. Very good point. Suzanne.
Okay. Isn't there something about 10 generations and Pharaoh's being the start of the count? Something about 10 generations?
I don't remember. Maybe
I think that's
generations between this one and that one, and then 10 more until the next, something like that.
Maybe regarding birth or whether or not a child would be considered legitimate. There's something, and I can't. Maybe Pastor Bruce might remember.
I think you're thinking of the very first chapter of Brit Hadasha that actually has 14 generations, 14. That's what I think you're thinking of, Susan. I believe.
Could have sworn it was 10.
It's actually 14 in Matthew.
In Matthew, right.
In Matthew. If you look at Matthew 1, you'll find 14 generations of up to the birth of Yeshua. I think that's what you're thinking of, but I'm not positive. But that's what I will say to you. Anyway.
Okay.
Thank you.
Something about 10 generations.
7. 1,
Going-
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And going from Pharez to David?
Oh, there's many more than 10 from Sarah to David.
Ricky,
No,
I know you have your chart there.
Pharez.
Yeah,
Okay.
I remember those generations as back between Adam and Eve to Noah, Noah to Abraham. Now, wasn't that, I was just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 here to Noah.
Yeah.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 from Noah to Abraham. So Susan might be picking up on way back.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll have to, oh, here's what I'm thinking of. It's in Deuteronomy, chapter 23, verse 2. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to his 10th generation shall he not enter. So, that's why I was thinking that these two kids that Tamar bore, they weren't born out of like a legitimate wedding. And so anyways, I guess that's where I was getting that from.
Okay.
Okay.
Grace,
Never mind.
Yeah.
Grace, you had your hand up before.
No, I had just forgotten to raise my hand lower.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other commentary about what we've just read? Anything? Okay. Then,
Ricky has her hand up.
Ricky, yes.
Okay, I'm going to read from the Orthodox Bible that I have.
Sure, please.
I mean, I try to switch back and forth. But Kabbalistically, now this is me. This is not me. This is the names Perez and Zerah have great mystical significance. Zerah, literally meaning shining or brightness, alludes to the sun, which is the source of constant light. Perez, on the other hand, means breach, alluding to the moon, whose light is sometimes whole and sometimes breached. It would have been logical for the brilliant, constant Zerah to be born first. But God wanted Perez to be the firstborn to symbolize the Davidic dynasty, which is likened to the moon because it became diminished and finally disappeared. But like the moon, it will reemerge and grow to fullness again. So there's, I think, a lot in that we have the, following the line down to David, the ebb and flow of a moon cycle and eventually to the Messiah, rather than the constant light, the brightness of Perez.
Okay, so appropriately enough, tonight is the full moon.
Oh.
Okay, and we're going to welcome Elijah, who will announce the coming of the Messiah. So thanks for tying it all together, Ricky.
Just ask.
Okay. So we'll go from moon rocks or moon rocks. Oh, yes, Grace.
Thank you. Before I forget, so the idea of ebb and flow, I believe for me anyway, it reminds me of my humanity, that I'm human and that I am going to ebb and flow and make mistakes and hold myself accountable for that. That's all. That's what I was, the lightness and the darkness of the moon and the ebb and flow of it. And even sometimes the sun is, clouded over. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
But by definition, if there are the ebbs, there are then the flows. So if we recognize that we will make mistakes, we recognize that we will also have great achievements.
Yes.
Right. Good point.
The opportunity for great achievement.
Good point. Well, any other discussion? Not Not hearing any.
No.
I don't see any hands. I guess we can resume the Joseph story.
Yeah.
And so there's been an interlude, if you will. A lot has happened during this interlude in the Joseph story. So if somebody would care to read.
Yeah, I'd be happy.
David, yes, please.
Okay, chapter 39. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him the hand of the Ishmaelites, and had brought him down hither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found favor in his sight, and he ministered unto him. And he appointed him overseer over his house, and that all he had he put into his hand.
Okay, let's stop at this point so we don't go too far ahead. Any comments about what you just read, David, and then if somebody else, yes, go ahead.
I have one comment that is, I think this is kind of interesting, that Joseph is now in Egypt, and even though he is a slave to a master that he's come down to, he's not feeling yet the evil of slavery and what's happening. He is starting out very, very well, and I think the Genesis is trying to tell us right at the beginning it's starting well. It's too bad it doesn't keep on that way.
Right.
But,
I know.
It saved us a holiday.
Okay, let me, everybody else has their hand up here. Let me do Don, Pastor Bruce, and Ricky.
Just real quick, my earlier question about allegiance, I said Joseph, only because I'd accidentally jumped a chapter. So
okay.
Forget my last question.
Okay.
Pull that to this chapter.
We'll get there. We'll get there, Don.
We'll get there. And Pastor Bruce, and then Rick.
I'm just double checking with the Hebrew, Adonai, Elohim. Which one is it, Rabbi?
What's your question, Bruce?
And 39:2. The Lord was with Joseph. Adonai, yes, or Elohim?
Elohim.
It's Adonai. It's the J. It's J-sor.
It's Adonai. Okay, that's a little bit more of the personal involvement word, I believe, in the idea of Lord, which
this is a biblical author who says God makes everything happen.
Yeah,
it's according to script.
Yeah,
there had been there'd been the prophecy that the Israelites, both with Abraham and then later and his progeny, were going to go down to Egypt. So
yes,
this is we're going to make it happen.
Yeah, and so just the phrase "the Lord was with Joseph" really stuck out to me as, the personal involvement of Adonai with him during that time. That's what I was going to say, I think.
And that's a phrase that's repeated a couple of times.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, we're going to see that.
Despite his travails, the Lord is with him.
Now, I have to, okay, Larry, you first.
Okay, the Lord was with him and he was prosperous. Joining these two phrases, the importance of being wealthy, prosperous, is that the main attribute of being closer to God, of God's relationship to man? Prosperity? I mean, we think about other attributes, morality, ethics, being a good person, But here, wealth is the reward. So let's talk about that.
Okay, it's a good question. Okay, first, well,
Ricky.
I saw several hands come up. I'm going to do Ricky, Chris, Rabbi, in that order.
Okay, I just wanted to go back that Joseph was sold to Potiphar by the Ishmaelites who had bought him from the brothers. That connotes a lower position. If you're somebody who can be sold, so the jump from being sold to being prosperous is just that just sort of bugs me, even though the Lord was with him. There's nothing that sort of ties those two aspects of him together.
I would agree with
my
you.
mind.
Does prosper, so can you still be a slave but be prosperous in other ways?
Yeah, Marty,
Absolutely.
if I may, I think Larry raises a very good discussion question, but
Yeah.
we've been kind of led astray by that translation of wealthy or prosperous. The Hebrew is actually successful.
Good. That was my question. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you can carry on with the discussion,
Mhm.
but
Successful in the
It's important, yes. So so can you, so anyway, go ahead, Chris. Well, wait a minute.
Right. No, that was exactly, I was going to ask the rabbi, what was the definition of prosperous? Because to me,
successful in
it's a
all
lot more
ways.
than just money.
In intellect,
In every sense of the way.
in understanding,
Right. And
right.
so I don't even consider prosperous money in the sense it's everything else.
Yeah.
So thank you, Rabbi.
House slave instead of out in the field.
Right.
Any other questions to be raised here? Yes, Pastor Bruce.
Just a comment. It seems as if as we're starting to talk about this idea of, the slavery, the sold, and then successful, because as we get into Joseph's life here in Egypt, there's a lot of ebb and flow of this same thought. This same thing happens as we get into this story. I don't want to jump ahead, but as you know, he gets thrown in prison for a while here, and there's this ebb and flow of the story that keeps going, and it seems to me that this ebb and flow of his story is the same ebb and flow of the Jewish people. To me, I mean, I look at this as kind of this ebb and flow, because when you think about the influence of Judaism and God's word amongst the world, being a very small people group in really in the long haul of things, the way you look at it. I mean, but the influence of Joseph, the success, if you will, of Joseph, the success of Jewish people throughout the years. I don't know. I'm just kind of looking at this historically, as this ebb and flow of what has gone on in and within the Jewish people, the values, the systems, the different things that God has used, and the influence of the Jewish people throughout the world. There's a quote that I think is interesting by Winston Churchill, and maybe some of you have heard this before. It was written in 1920. We owe to the Jews a system of ethics which, even if it were entirely separated from the supernatural, would be incomparably the most precious possession of mankind, worth in fact the fruits of all wisdom, and learning put together. On that system and by that faith, there has been built out of the wreck of the Roman Empire the whole of our existing civilization. I find that to be an interesting quote but when you look at the ebb and flow of Joseph here already, just in the short amount of time that we've looked at it, it kind of keeps going throughout history. And that quote by Winston Churchill I found to be interesting in this very thought.
Okay, Rabbi?
This is a quote that I'm reading from the Eitz Chaim commentary. Some of you may have that. That the verse can be read. This is verse 2. The Lord was with Moses when he was a successful man, and also when he stayed in the house of his Egyptian master. Some people are conscious of God's presence in their lives only when they are successful. When adversity strikes, they believe God has abandoned them. Joseph felt God's presence in his life, both in good times and in bad times.
Right.
That was.
That is so true, Rabbi. We all do it. Yep.
That is part of the question. Part of the question I was going to raise, because when we say the Lord was with Joseph, we can take it at face value that this is all being God directed.
Right.
But at the same time, wouldn't it mean that Joseph had to change by all of the experiences he's had to this point? He is thanking God and is now more receptive to God, so that he realized that he has been saved through God's action. In other words, this is a two-way street. It's just not God playing a chess game here. The chess piece itself has to be willing to do this. Because from this point on, Joseph does things according to what he has remembered about the teachings about God and what God would. This is what God would expect you to do. This is, and he starts to change. Is this a pivot point, in other words, in the Joseph story? Even before he encounters Potiphar's wife. So I don't know, but that's why I say that he had to be receptive to this whole concept.
And what was the aha moment then? When did he go from being the arrogant kind of teenager and whatever into now someone who has a deep sense of faith and his role in history?
The pit.
You got it.
Okay.
As Ricky would say, you have
There's
to
got to
get
be
your Lord.
there's got to be a Shakespeare quote for that.
Sure there is.
Yeah, no kidding.
Definitely everybody's pit.
So this dovetails into what has already been discussed, that as Pastor Bruce points out, that life is just not a straight line. It's going to have little deviations all the time. Just like for those of you who like to watch the stock market, it's like, the craziness. Well, brainwaves are that way too.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Energy.
So you can, I think that there's an importance here that it's a two-way street. You have to be willing to you have God as a transmitter, and you have to be willing to be the receiver.
Right. Yeah. And it's always been the same plan from day one.
So maybe. Okay. I see several hands that came up. Joanne and then Michael.
Okay. What I'm seeing is the Lord is with Joseph, but others see this in him, and I'm wondering if he is following some scripture. There, it isn't really written down, etc., but some kind of scripture. Having every day you say some kind of prayer to your one God, and they see this in him, that he is a little bit different, maybe a quiet individual that answers their questions politely or something. I guess I just think it's something that he does, that they see this.
Okay, very good. Very good. Michael?
Let me see, I'm not muted. If I can talk a moment about the word successful and prosperous. Successful in modern day, the successful is an all-encompassing word. It really represents a lot of things, going on. Prosperous or prosperity would mean essentially wealth, as I would see it. And so I would ask this question: can a homeless person be considered successful?
Very interesting question. Any comments? Well, Michael, what do you think?
I think it's possible. I think it can be, because the person who is homeless, you do not know the circumstances why that individual is homeless. He could have had, or that person could have had a very rewarding life in one way or another, but something brought that person down to a point in his life from various different reasons. And that can be discussed, but generally, I think it's certainly possible.
Good point. Yes, Ricky.
It depends on how you define homeless, because a few of us have read the book No Man Land, and then there's the movie. But people that choose to be homeless, get off the grid. I mean, off the grid is not necessarily homeless, but you could be successful in your choice of how you choose to live your life. So, and if that choice, I think we're kind of looking at homelessness as the guy that lives under a bridge in a cardboard, box. And homeless is quite a bit larger spectrum. And I can't tell you how many RVs I've seen. My home is where I park it. But the person is technically homeless because doesn't have a permanent address. Is that just the definition? So, but I believe that even the one under the bridge in the cardboard, house, could be successful in what that person chooses to do with their life.
Exactly.
And it may not be what you or I.
Exactly.
That's right.
Successful. They are successful in what they've chosen.
No, I would agree with that.
Very well stated.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
So maybe this word success could imply that he knew who he was.
Yeah.
He had figured out that he's still an important person despite everything.
Right.
He thought he was important, and then he was thrown into the pit. But now success may mean something else rather than physical.
Right.
So there's a lot. That's why I wanted to bring this discussion a little bit.
Marty,
Any
Michael,
other comments?
Michael wanted to go.
Excuse me?
Michael wanted to say something else.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed it. Yes, Michael.
That's okay. Something else that I thought of is that if you would take a poll of a number of people and ask them, would you, out of the two possibilities only, would you prefer to be successful or known as successful, or prosperous or known as prosperous, have prosperity in your life? It's just a question I would just, not at this moment, but I thought that would be something of interest.
You have to define those terms before we could answer that.
Right, exactly. Thank you, Ren. Thank you.
Well, I would frame it just that way and just run with it, let people talk about it.
Okay.
Just like what you just did, Ricky. And that's a fair comment.
Okay. Pastor Bruce had his hand up, and then Don.
Whether we were talking about homelessness or any stage of life, I think from a biblical standpoint, you can be, well, however you define success and prosperous, there's a human way of looking at that, and there's divine way of looking at that. That's how I'm going. That's how I'm going to phrase that. I'll say there's a human way of looking at it and a divine way of looking at it. If you are truly loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and loving your neighbor as yourself completely, I hope and pray that we would consider that to be successful and prosperous. That's all I got to say.
And walk humbly with our God. We got to throw in Micah's.
Good point. Good point. Don, is it okay to let the rabbi say something before you do? You're muted, Don.
You're muted, Don.
I was trying to say, of course.
Oh, okay. The rabbi, you're on.
Yeah, and I would second what Bruce is saying, but just I'm going to now muddy the waters a little bit, because the psalmist, which there are many psalms that begin with Ashrei Yoshvei, Ashrei Ha'ish, something like that, and frequently that adjective is translated as happy, but it also could be prosperous because it comes from Osher, that means riches. But it's usually the best translation, at least my teachers always said, was fortunate. So maybe if we had happy, prosperous, successful, and fortunate into the list now.
Does that mean that the person was able to divine better than others? He would see things in the stars, as Shakespeare would say. Is it predetermined?
Oh God, here we go.
Well, no, this is because when you say fortunate,
right,
that implies luck. Lady
Well, not necessarily in the biblical sense.
I
not
know,
luck in the biblical sense. It's more fate.
Oh, okay. That changes.
But well, okay.
That changes.
But there's still some mystical aspect of this.
Oh, sure.
I have a
wait a
question.
minute. Wait.
Sorry.
Wait. I got it.
Oh, she's your wife.
I know.
Go ahead.
I that so many other people have their hands up. Okay, Don, we'll get to you now, and then Ricky.
We're throwing around a lot of abstract terms like fortunate and successful, and but again, in my volunteer stuff, I spent a lot of time working with homeless in Seattle, and through the Real Change program there. And I can tell you that you gotta look a long ways before you find somebody who could ever be considered successful in any respect or fortunate, because in this country, once you drop below a certain threshold, you can't get back. You are homeless, and you will permanently homeless. We try to, some friends and I try to bring a guy up into having a home by chipping in and renting a place. But it really wasn't sustainable because of the way our society operates. You know, there aren't any safety nets. You know, people just fall down and they don't get up. And so the only term, and somebody brought this up earlier, that I would consider appropriate to alleviate the pain of that situation is hope.
Yes.
Because without hope, you're gone.
You're gone.
You know?
That's a good point.
And yeah, hopelessness is pretty much in the best of us.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all I had to say.
Good point. Good
Thank you.
point.
Thank you,
Now,
Don.
After Don, I forgot who else, and then Michael has his hand up now, but Ricky, I know, okay, Ricky, go ahead.
And
then
Sue.
Michael.
And then Sue.
And Sue. Oh, okay. Okay, Ricky?
Anyway, a quickie. The fortunate brought up in my mind the term we frequently use in our society about, you know, serendipity or miracles. And I say I not only believe in miracles, I depend on them.
Okay. I understand what you're getting after, sure.
Oh, that was just my quickie.
Is it okay for Michael? Sure. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
What about Susan?
No, go ahead, Mike.
She said it's okay for you to go first.
Okay, I just can't help interject this. So powerful for me. I had the two most wonderful people in my life was my mother and my father. And when I left the Bronx to come to Southern California, to Hollywood, because I wanted to see if there was a career for me in music and entertainment. And my mom, she told me, honey, go find your happiness. She didn't say, go get wealthy or don't be successful. Find your happiness. And I always remember that. And with that, I found everything in my life. That everything else what made me happy. Go find your happiness. And she supported in what I did was music all my life. That's all I do. And she
Take away.
and they were great. Very, very hard for me.
We feel for you, Michael, and she was a very, very wise woman.
Yeah.
They were great. I had the greatest people.
You're very fortunate.
I would like to respond to some point that you touched on, Michael, because it's very important. There are families that try to decide for their children what they should become and what they must become. There are others who recognize that a child has a gift. What does the world need of me? I happen to be gifted in music as you are. So you are answering the world in a sense. Here is my gift to you. And your mother was very wise in recognizing that. And you have always given generously of that gift, never disappointed. And that's a beautiful thing. And I wanted to just also answer something. The word fate came up. And I am somewhat troubled by it as a Jew, because perhaps too parochially, I was taught that Jews don't invest much in the notion of fate. I happen to love the Kabbalah and its teachings, but I don't invest much as a Jew in the notion of fate, because we are given choice and we are supposed to learn through our choices. It's a dangerous minefield out there that we're stepping upon through life. And it's through that process that we make our choices, good or bad. If there were no bad, there would be no contrast and no definition of good. So I don't believe that it's predetermined in any sense of the word. You determine what you are doing with your life. And it hurts me terribly to meet people who don't think that they have the right to determine how the outcome of their lives. I always find that very sad when I meet people like that. Just a thought about the idea of fate and all of that. Romantically, I like to think that certain people are beshert, you know, they're meant to be. But I don't think it's determined by outside forces. And I really don't think it's predetermined. I think that is a matter of circumstance or perhaps good fortune, but I don't think it's fated. Yes, Rabbi?
Well, the only, I don't disagree with you at all, but I do need to point out that there have been times in Jewish history, literature, and thinking where the predetermined and, you know, and fate and destiny was the major you know, point of view. Okay. And we don't have to go into it now, but certainly there have been times. I do agree with you now, whatever. I also wanted to quote, and some of you might know it or recall it. It's Ben Zoma in Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of the Fathers in the Mishnah, who asked, who is wise, who is strong, and who is rich? Is who ashir, who is rich, is the one hasameach b'chalko, the one who is content with his own lot, with his own position and fate, if you will. But that's what makes someone, at least in the rabbinic Mishnaic period, 2,000 years ago, that was their definition of someone who was rich or fortunate or happy, or
and that would be a very successful person.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Pastor Bruce has had his hand, and Ricky, and then I want to read something.
Okay.
Ricky was actually before me. Go ahead.
Oh,
Ricky.
okay. I'm sorry.
To go back to the sentence of find your happiness. I do it different. You know, what is your purpose? You know, what is your, is that if you find your purpose, what that will be your happiness, that will be your joy, that will be what you give to the earth. So I use the word purpose instead of happiness. Happiness comes from the word happenstance. It's very dependent on outside things. My purpose comes from inside.
From within me, right.
That's okay. Pastor Bruce.
The word that's coming into my head, and Rabbi, you can confirm this, a lot of the psalmists, at least in the English translations that I'm using, the word would be blessed.
I like that
No,
word.
blessed, it's a different Hebrew.
It's a different word. Okay, because there's a lot of psalms that start with blessed, and there's a lot of psalms. So I was thinking, can you be, with all these things we've been sharing, is that another word that we can use? And I was thinking it could be another word that we can use, that we are blessed, prosperous, successful, all these different words. To me, could you put that? We haven't used that word yet in this conversation, so I wanted to bring that word in as well.
Okay.
Good.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to read something to you, and then I will let Larry. Sue is telling me I was looking something up so I could read this, because I think this dovetails into our discussion. Out of the night that covers me, black is the pit from pole to pole. I thank whatever gods may be for before my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade. And yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Okay, this is by William Henley. This is what got Nelson Mandela through prison.
Right.
Yes, Larry.
I want that wonderful, and it's called Invictus.
Yes.
That's right.
And I wanted to just follow up and pass to Bruce. Another word is bliss that we haven't used, and that describes so much of this, as in follow your bliss.
Mm-hmm.
Another term.
Word, yes.
So I think that Michael's mom was pretty wise.
Yes.
Very, very good, Michael. Thank you for doing this, for sharing everything. Any other comments, or do we want? Yes, Joanne.
I'm thinking back to Joseph and the Lord was with Joseph. My computer is unstable, so I go in and out here, but the word blessed is an intriguing word to think about Joseph and how he maneuvered and walked through all the adversaries. I mean, he's thrown into a pit. He angers his brothers. He angers his father. And now he's interpreting dreams, which have already gotten him into trouble. But he seems to walk in a blessed way. And maybe that tells me what the Lord is with him. And he seems to understand that in some way, in a very deep spot. So that's my thinking about all this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other? Yes, David.
Yeah, I think this discussion that Pastor Bruce started and that others have picked up on so beautifully is the situation with happiness and blessedness. It's so important. And it extends out like a branch of a tree into secular life. One of the central reasons that I relocated to the United States 40 years ago was the idea that this is the only country in the world, for all of its problems, that puts the word happiness in its founding document. And I remember talking to my dad about that, and he said, but it doesn't promise you happiness. What it does do is it promises you the right to pursue happiness. And I've never forgotten that. And I think that's such an important thing in this country, and to be as part of this country to appreciate. And thank you for bringing up all these points. This is
Did your
wonderful.
dad know Michael's mother?
I think they would have been friends.
I think they would have been.
Yes.
They would have been.
Chris, yes.
Thank you. I just, as I finished to listening to all of you and talking about all the wonderful gifts, because that's what it is. It's a gift from God that has given us all the prosperity and all the happiness and all the peace that we have. I'm also thinking that Joseph had to do something to be able to receive these gifts. And I love to bring the word trust, that Joseph trusted God to carry on with his plan, regardless of how Joseph saw everything coming at.
Thank you. Thank you. Marcia, did you have your
Yes.
hand up? Yes.
I sit here and I listen, and I think that what we talk about and the insights that we bring to what we read today really says to me, this is a session of understanding of other people. This is a session that is very important to me, being able to observe, because then you digest it and say, what does it mean to you? So I wanted to thank everybody.
We're glad
You
you're
were,
here.
thank you for thank you.
Thank everybody.
But you've contributed too. Yeah. Michael, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I wanted to address this to David for a moment. Another very, very important factor about the United States being a very great nation is the fact that, and this is very charged, a situation around the world with religion. Every religion is allowed to be practiced in the United States, where you don't have that in many countries around the world. If you don't practice their religion, you could be imprisoned, you can be thrown out, and you can be killed. But here in the United States, every religion is allowed with freedom to be practiced. And that's a very, very important part of the greatness of this nation, I believe.
Thank you, Michael. That's well put. Any other comments? Okay. Then why don't we read on a little bit? Okay. I think we start with verse 5.
Yeah.
Okay. So if somebody has it there, if they would care to read.
Okay, I'd be happy to. And it came to pass from the time that he appointed him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and having him, he knew not aught save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was of beautiful form and fair to look upon.
Okay, let's stop at that point. Any comments at this point? Well, do you think that that Joseph was doing something that the Lord found pleasing?
Absolutely.
And
I think Wendy had something she wanted to say.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Wendy.
Yeah, you were saying something over there, sweetie. Yeah, she is on her way.
Okay.
A couple, I guess early on, one of our discussions, we were talking about karma. And all I could think of when they were saying the Lord has blessed Joseph now and he was fair to look on and everything was going well, I thought, with all Joseph has been through, his karma came due.
Nicely put.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, Chris, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was exactly thinking the same thing as Wendy, but I didn't call it karma. It's just that our people, the Jewish people, had always been a blessing to the world in one way or another, I believe, with my heart. And And especially when we're walking or talking our faith, our beliefs, and our lives through what we do. And I think we'll always be blessing the people around us when we are sincere with God. And I like to say that that's what happened to Joseph. He was being Joseph, and God was showing the Egyptians what they could have if they were just believe, as Joseph was doing, I think.
Okay, Michael, you have, thank you, Chris, yes.
I want to ask Chris a question.
Yes.
I believe everything you just said. So this is the question. Why, in your opinion, is there so much anti-Semitism here and around the world?
Well, I don't know. You'd always ask me the hard questions, Michael.
It's a good question. It's not a hard
Yeah,
question.
no, I understand. I'm just kidding, okay?
No, it's a good question. That's why I asked
It is a good question. Well, it's been from the beginning that people doesn't like us and they hate us, but that's definitely not God's plan. And I really don't know how to answer your question because.
And especially when what you said, the Jews, the more the Jews do, the
Right.
better we do, the more we're hated.
I understand. But gosh, but do you also realize how much we bless them because of the things that we do? I mean, even if we don't intend to bless them, sometimes they just get blessed,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. Rabbi, help me.
No,
Rabbi, help me, please.
I just want to interject before I recognize Suzanne and Don. This it can be a loaded question, Michael, and I don't want to. I don't want to cause people any uneasiness, but it is it is an important topic. And I know there are many conferences, discussions, lecture series, books written about this very question. So, I don't know if the rabbi would want to do this as a separate discussion at some time.
Sure.
But I think it would be, it's worthwhile in and of itself. So Suzanne, you were going to say something and then Don.
Okay. And I know that what I'm about to say is not a belief held probably by the majority of this group, but in my mind, the question is very easy to answer because Satan wants all the Jewish people dead. If they're dead, then the prophecies that are to come cannot be fulfilled and Satan wins his war with God. I mean, to me, it's pretty straightforward, and it started back in Genesis with chapter 3.
Okay, thank you.
It's real easy in my opinion.
Thank you. Don.
Yeah, and I'm going to separate what I'm going to say from modern anti-Semitism. But reading through the Tanakh, I am struck to the point of depression sometimes, reading some of the stories of what the Hebrew tribes did to the Canaanites and the Midianites and the Alis, and the slaughter, the indiscriminate slaughter that took place, men, women, children, to the point of extermination. And sometimes I have to put it down because I can't go any further. And I guess I don't believe that those stories have much, if anything, to do with modern anti-Semitism, because I don't think anybody reads those stories these days. But at least it demonstrates that we are not a perfect people
No.
by any stretch of the imagination. And we are guilty of everything anybody else can be guilty of. So I think anti-Semitism can be politically useful across the globe. And it's the first thing that that dictators resort to when they get in trouble, or seems to be. And for some reason, the masses seem to jump at the bait. And I don't pretend to understand all the psychology with that, but I do know that I can get pretty down reading our own history sometimes.
Okay.
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 Anyone else?
Suzanne, you had a comment, and then the rabbi.
Yeah, again, I recognize that my view on what Don just commented on is probably not widely held, but for all those groups where God has said to like slaughter everybody, man, woman, and child, and so forth, to me, they're all part of Rephaim, which are related to the Nephilim, and they are not fully human. Their genetic code has been corrupted. In other words, I think of them as hybrids. So, but God would never say to slaughter every man, woman, and child if they were fully human. So these hybrids, if you will, or Rephaim, were not really children of God, so to speak. And I know that's not a widely held view, not even among Christians. It's just how I look at it. And again, I turn to Genesis, where it all started in chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. So anyways, I don't want you to feel guilty, Don, about the slaughtering of Rephaim.
I don't feel guilty. I'm just sad.
Well, don't feel sad.
Yeah.
These are enemies of all of us, not only the Jewish people, but also the rest of humanity.
Well, I certainly don't rationalize it. I mean, I don't know about changes to the genetic code or anything. I don't think I would take that step. I just feel sad when I read this because there it is in print. There's no comments. There's no reference to DNA. It's just, that's what happened.
Yeah, back in those days, there was no understanding of DNA. I mean, that's, what we understand today. But, well, anyways, I don't want to get into a whole discussion here with that, but I'm just saying it's another way of looking at something which you may or may not agree with and most likely won't agree with. So, but it's how I look at it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Rabbi, I know you've been sitting there very patiently.
And contemplatively.
Okay.
I mean, responding certainly, and I think this suggestion is a prudent one that we schedule an opportunity for not only sharing our thoughts about anti-Semitism, but also studying some of the roots of it. Maybe we can organize a panel discussion with some experts and scholars and things like that. I'm going to bring this to a close, I suppose, on your behalf, Marty. Tonight, many of us will be asking traditional 4 questions, but as Marcia said, the opportunity that we have to get together like this raises so many more questions, and all we can do is hope that the insights of telling our history, Higgadah Talavincha, celebrating Passover, but also moving forward. What is our role now that in trying to provide a good, viable, meaningful, and hopeful answers to the questions that we ask. So I'm going to leave it at that. Wish everybody a good Yontif, a Zis and Pesach, a sweet, healthy, and meaningful Passover. And to those of us who are sitting here this morning who aren't celebrating Passover, but you will be celebrating your spring redemption and renewal festivals, may you find meaning and peace in your celebrations and observances as well.
Yeah.
Amen.
One thing, Rabbi, if I may say, to add to what you said, if we have the discussion, I think what would be asked too, has any one of us have personally experienced anti-Semitism?
Sure.
That would be
Sure,
okay.
that's part of it. Absolutely. Mhm.
Okay, very good. Well, I think this is a good place to stop, as not only because of the clock, not only because of it's a good place to begin a new discussion next time, but because the rabbi said so.
Happy Passover, happy Easter. And
Yes.
be well.
Be well, everyone.